Hi, my name is Heidi. I was first diagnosed with endometriosis at the age of 37. So I first started experiencing symptoms of endometriosis at the age of 12. I would have blackouts and particularly painful periods. My mum actually took me to a gynecologist when I was about 14 years old to get checked, and they said I was absolutely fine, and all they did was an external examination. I then came over to the UK when I was 20, and I would see my GP practice every 6 to 10 months approximately with terrible pain where, as I said, I would have blackouts and I would have such painful periods, and my GP just said that it was something called dysmenorrhea, which I didn't actually know what that meant at the time, only being 20 something and with no access to the internet. And I later found out that it meant very painful periods. And they seemed to just dismiss me as having painful periods for years, and they gave me mefenamic acid just for painful periods. And I went on for about 13, 14 years without being diagnosed. And I was only diagnosed by accident at the age of 37 when I'd started experiencing blackouts during bowel movements. And the pain was excruciating, and it was quite scary at the time. And my GP referred me for a scan, an ultrasound scan for my bowel. And at the GP practice they said it was fine, the ultrasound was fine, and my symptoms progressed. And I think 6 months later I was referred to a bowel specialist for a further MRI scan, and fortunately the radiologist spotted that there was something wrong with my uterus and my bowel, and they said that I should be referred to a gynecologist. And if it wasn't for that radiologist spotting something up with my uterus during a routine bowel scan, I would not have been diagnosed. And during all this time, my husband and I had been trying for a family, so for years, and we'd never been successful, not even close. I was then sent to a gynecologist, had a laparoscopy which showed that I had endometriosis, and I didn't even know what that was. I didn't even know how that would affect me, and the gynecologist, all he said at the time was that I needed to probably have IVF. But he said I had stage 4 endometriosis, which in those days they used to stage them, but he said I had stage 4 endometriosis and the likelihood of me actually conceiving was very slim. So I went away and had 1 round of IVF, which wasn't successful at all. And they did offer me another round, but it was a lot for your body to go through, having hormones injected every day, and it did seem to aggravate the endometriosis. So I didn't want a second go because I knew that the likelihood of it being successful, was very, very slim. Because it took 13 years plus for me to be diagnosed with endometriosis, despite my numerous visits to my GP, I feel quite sad at the fact that I've missed out on having a family. If they had have diagnosed me sooner, or if the GPs had have been aware of what endometriosis was or recognised the signs and symptoms, this might have been a very different story. I might have had at least 1 child by now, but I've now had a hysterectomy, so that possibility has completely gone, and it does make me, very sad. So following my IVF, I plodded on with the endometriosis for a few years, and I seemed to be forgotten about by the system. It was only when my blackouts started getting more frequent and I had some heart issues associated with it and lots of bowel pain that I went back to my GP and asked for a referral to a gynecologist. I was referred to Birmingham Women's Hospital, and they suggested that I have a round of Prostap, which is a hormone suppressant injection that you have every month, and it puts you into a temporary menopause. I'd never experienced this before, and I wasn't really told too much about it at the hospital or what the symptoms might be other than hot flashes. That's the only thing they mentioned to me. And I was sent home with that and felt absolutely dreadful about 2 weeks in, I felt like somebody had switched off my light. I went into an emotionless state where everything just felt futile and pointless. And although my periods had stopped and I didn't really have the endometriosis pain anymore, I did have a whole range of other symptoms like hot flashes, and as I say, this dark, emotionless state, which was actually quite scary. And my husband was quite worried about leaving me alone when I was feeling like that. And I'd never experienced this before, so I phoned the gynecologist, who said that, oh yes, this can happen to some women where they go into menopause, and this is one of the symptoms. So she suggested that I have an estrogen patch, which would help mitigate the symptoms and give me a little bit of estrogen back, because the Prostap suppresses your estrogen supply. So after 2 weeks of being on the patch, I felt much better and I felt fine. And I thought, having been on Prostap for 3 months or 6 months, I can't remember the exact amount of time, that this is what menopause would feel like. Actually, it felt all right when I had the add-back therapy of just 50 micrograms of estrogen. So when it was suggested that I have a total hysterectomy a few months later, I didn't think that there would be a huge issue with the hormonal side of it. I was more worried about the pain and, you know, what I'd go through with the surgery. I agreed to the hysterectomy. By this stage, I had adenomyosis, endometriosis, fibroids and frozen pelvis, and the endometriosis had progressed to my bowel. So if I didn't have the total hysterectomy or some sort of surgery, the risk was that the endometriosis was going to penetrate through the bowel wall, and I would have had to have some of my bowel removed and a colostomy bag. So I opted for the hysterectomy surgery. The surgery itself went really smoothly and was great. I had no pain upon waking up from the surgery. I had absolutely no pain at all. So from that perspective, it was a huge success. I did also ask my gynecologist for an adhesion barrier, because one of the issues that I've read and from many women that I know is that following numerous surgeries, whether it's a laparoscopy or a hysterectomy or whatever it is, we get adhesions in our abdomen, and these adhesions can be just as painful as the endometriosis itself. And I didn't want to have any adhesions forming after my hysterectomy. So I'd read up about adhesion barriers, and I specifically asked my gynecologist to insert an adhesion barrier after my surgery. He was quite reluctant and said that there was no guarantee that it would work, but on the same hand, if there were no risks associated with it. So I'd rather try than not try. So he did. He used something called hyaluronic acid, which is an adhesion barrier, which is harmless. We have hyaluronic acid in many forms, in cosmetics and I think in other surgeries. Anyway, so I had that and had no problems after I woke up from my surgery. The thing that I did have 12 hours after my surgery were very severe menopause symptoms. And I'm not talking, I just thought menopause symptoms would be things like hot flushes or this mood, this very dark, low mood that I'd experienced previously. I had no idea that there were a range of other symptoms that can happen to some women. Obviously it doesn't happen to all women, but if you're hormone sensitive, it happens to you. So my heart rate dropped very low, below 30 beats a minute at one point, or a few points. I struggled to breathe, I struggled to swallow. I thought I was going to die in the hospital, as I say, not because of the surgery itself, but because of the extreme effects of the sudden withdrawal of hormones from my body and having my ovaries removed overnight. My body didn't go through a natural menopause like most women do when they reach their 50s. I was younger and my body had gone into an immediate menopause. So the doctors at the hospital didn't seem to know what was going on with me. 5 days later I was sent home, but my husband was taking me in and out of A&E with collapses and not being able to breathe and not being able to swallow. I also had sinus problems and digestive problems. heart issues where my heart just felt like it was stopping every so often, and a range of other things. Also the dark and low mood, anxiety, a terrible feeling of anxiety, nausea. I couldn't eat for nearly 2 months. The doctors and my husband had to give me 40 sips, so I could only drink food. So initially after surgery I lost some weight. I know there's a lot of questions from ladies out there about what happens after surgery. Do you gain weight? Well, I lost weight because I couldn't eat, but my doctor gave me HRT, which is hormone replacement, about 2 or 3 weeks after my surgery. But little did I know that because I'd left it for over 2 weeks, that it takes a lot longer to rebuild your estrogen and hormone levels the longer you leave it, and the longer you don't replace it after something like a hysterectomy or after your ovaries are removed. So it took me 10 or 11 months to try and replace my estrogen levels, and even then I didn't reach normal levels. I was still very low, but at that point I stopped having the bad attacks and the breathing issues, and I was on the patch. Eventually I switched over to the pill, and now I finally feel like a normal human being again, and my hormone levels are back up to normal. But it's been a long and hard road, so I'd say to anybody out there who's thinking of having a total hysterectomy with their ovaries removed, it's a lot more than hot flushes and migraines. There's a lot more involved, and there's a lady that's going to be coming on to this in a minute who will tell you the same thing. And if it wasn't for groups like Women with Endometriosis and some of the hormone groups that I'm on, I don't think I would have learnt as much as I did. I also went as far as getting medical textbooks and researching. My gynecologist, during this 10-month period when I was trying to level out my hormones, a range of things were happening to me. I was referred to a cardiologist because I had a few collapses where my heart just didn't want to beat. I was referred to a gastro specialist. I was referred to 3 different ENTs because of my swallowing issues, sinus issues and blocked ears. All of them didn't really seem to know what was going on with me. I had to then do my own research and teach myself. I ordered the medical textbook, hysterectomy and HRT from Amazon, and read that cover to cover about 5 times to educate myself on hormone therapy. And it was only because of doing that that I made the link between low estrogen and so many health symptoms like osteoporosis, heart disease. I also developed thyroid issues from the time of my surgery to date. So they found 5 nodules on my thyroid, which I never had before surgery. So all of this happened after my ovaries removed, and it's just amazing how much of a woman's body and your health depend on your hormones. It's not something to be taken lightly, and I do hope that the medical profession take women's hormone health and their ovarian and endometrial health as seriously as they do some other diseases out there.